Yep, we are live. Hi, Arjun. Welcome to Unscripted episode 4, and we're talking on my favorite topic, men's mental health. But before we get started, I just want to ask you, how are you doing and how have things been for you over the weekend?
Thank you, Divya, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and things have been great. It's raining in Gurgaon, so I'm just trying not to drown in the water, but mostly all good.
So, yeah. So, when I thought of men's mind, when I was thinking of this topic, कि मैं next क्या बात करूं, and then I saw one of your Instagram posts, and I was like, okay, we're doing men's mental health, then the only person who can talk about this is Arjun. And that's when, I was like, I'm reaching out to you. I'll ask you to come in. I'm like super excited to be talking on this topic. How did you get started with this whole men's mental health?
I think it came from a very personal space for me back in 2015 when I was first diagnosed with clinical depression. And I think I was a 17-year-old boy at the time, very young, in a tier 3 city. And I, for the life of me, did not believe I had clinical depression. क्योंकि मेरे को ऐसे था कि डिप्रेशन नाम की कोई चीज़ नहीं होती, ये लड़कों को थोड़ी होती है, ऐसे जिनको बहाना बनाना होता है. Those are the people who get depressed. I cannot be depressed. That's what I thought. And I think for a long time, for at least 18 months, I added to my suffering, I added to my issues because I was refusing the fact that I had depression. I wasn't really cooperating with anybody. And that's how I got into psychology in the first place. I dropped out of MBBS, got into psychology. I wanted some answers, and since then I've just been working on that. I think I enjoy this field where we look at how our socio-cultural surroundings, how our biological mechanisms have effects on our mental health, on our psychological spaces. And that's what I'm doing with my research work, the stuff I did in my UG, in my dissertations, and the stuff I'm doing right now with my content or with digital spaces we're making for men. I feel like there are spaces that we need for men to discuss the issues that we face, and that's what I'm trying to do ever since.
Okay, so this is a lot inspired from your journey, and then now it's like finding answers for yourself and also helping people around. So you talked
Yeah.
about building spaces that you're trying to also create for men. I'm going to ask you, like, how can we as a society come in to help men feel safe, to help men feel heard, and just all the things that a woman wants to feel, to like at least those
I think
basic.
I think it's quite a huge challenge to take on to suggest that we can do things that will make men feel safe. Because I'll be honest, I think a boy hears for the first time when he's 5 or 6 that you're not supposed to cry. You're a brave boy. You're a tiger. You're the son of a tiger. Why are you crying? And it, just any expression of emotions is numbed down since we are very very young, and it happens today as well. I mean, there are progressive people who are trying to change that, but even then, I think how we make boys, young boys, very young boys, feel about their own emotions, about their own feelings, creates a lot of issues for when they grow up, for when they become teenagers or young adults or middle aged adults. And society as a collective, if we want to change something like that, I think that's what we need to focus on. That boys, young males are human beings as well. They are capable of feeling hurt, feeling rejected, feeling alone as well, and we need to help them out in those situations so that they can learn how to figure those things out when they're adults. And that's easier said than done, isn't it? There's no magic wand that we can raise and then everybody will be like, okay,
Mm,
we will completely change those things. But I think it's every conversation we have is important,
mm.
and that's what we're trying to do.
So, well, while I understand a lot of these emotions and what we believe does stem from our childhood, but for men who have grown up now, right? Uh,
Mm.
if they had to today understand that and start understanding themselves, perhaps, or their emotions, right? How could they go about it? How could someone around them, a close person around them, could create that space for them to open up?
That's a really good question, and I think there are a lot of stages that a person goes through before opening up. And I think I made a post about it as well. I think the first thing you need to know is first acknowledge that there is an internal world of emotions inside you, that something is happening inside you. And for a lot of men, for a lot of young men, they are so completely detached from their emotions, just so completely numb from inside, that they don't know what they're feeling. You ask them, what are you feeling, which they don't know. They're like, कुछ तो चल रहा है अंदर, मतलब अच्छा नहीं लग रहा, बट पता नहीं क्या है. So there's this emotion wheel that comes in, and that helps a lot, whether it is with my clients or with people who are seeking help from me. It comes in very handy because it has a list of different things, different kind of emotion words which you can learn slowly, and that helps you label the emotions that you're feeling. So that's step one. First, know what you're feeling, and that will help you understand what you are going through. And after that comes the aspect of opening up to other people, trusting them with this stuff. And that also requires a lot of trust building, because big secret, we are always afraid that if we show our emotions to somebody, somebody will use them against us, somebody will gossip about them with somebody else. And there's a lot of fear of vulnerability that comes in. Ki people will laugh at us, people will judge us, people will not trust, not respect our privacy in those situations. So
Hmm.
that is again trust building exercises that need to happen with people. If you need to win that trust, you need to win that faith from them, that you are there for them, you are not there to judge them, laugh at them, or share those things with other people. uh, you are there for them because you care for them and you want to help them.
Okay. So what I'm understanding from this is more about, uh, of course, पहले तो acceptance चाहिए. Acceptance के बिना तो second step never happens.
Mm.
But say acceptance आ गया, उसके बाद even if a man wants to open up, they probably are held back by a lot of other, I would say, societal thoughts or factors that have been conditioned into their head. I mean, I understand it. ठीक है, you might not, you meaning not you, but men in general might not be comfortable with probably opening up to, I would say, females in their life, their girlfriend, their wife, their sisters, anyone it could be. Like, but like I've seen in my circle itself, a lot of guys, telling other guys like, bro, just suck it up. It's okay. Like, not a big deal. Don't cry. So that's where I actually get infuriated, and I'm like, this is ridiculous outright. So I just want to know your take on this whole thing, and yeah, how can we really work actively towards this?
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I think I think guys with each other, we somewhere have lost that sense of brotherhood where we feel like we are there for each other. We, even in tough times, even if we don't know what the solutions are to our problems, we are there for them, just to let them know that they're not alone. And I feel like that's a feeling of brotherhood, of belonging, of being a part of something greater than yourself that is missing in a lot of groups of boys, a lot of groups of men with themselves. They're very deeply attached to those friends, they are very close to them, they know what they're going through, they are very close, but the friendships don't run as deep as they can. मतलब
Hmm.
it's at an emotional level, it becomes very surface level कि भाई कुछ हो भी रहा है, even if something is happening, don't tell me, it will become a bit awkward. So it's that awkwardness that we are trying to run away from very often. And because of that, I feel like a lot of guys are more comfortable in talking about their emotions with their wives, with their girlfriends, with their female friends. And because they know that if I say something like this in front of the guys, I don't know how they'll react. They might laugh at me, they might judge me, or they might just tell me ki, why are you crying so much. So it's that's how it that's how the change happens, right? One person speaking up saying that I need some help would bring about a change in the whole group. Like either they will all be like, okay, this is a friend of ours, a very good friend of ours who suddenly needs our help and we need to help him out however we can, or they'd out themselves as being very surface level people who are just there for the good times, not the bad times, right? So it's about the risk you take when you actually open up and you find out who's actually yours, who actually is there to help you, and who's there just for the good times.
Well, that's a deep answer there, and that I mean goes deep beyond the essence of the words that you just shared about who's actually there for you. And this does bring me to my something that just popped up in my head when you were talking. That was when someone reaches out to the other person. I think this is a very common question that even I get is how, if I see someone is sad, my friend is sad, my brother is sad, my partner is sad, but I don't know how to approach and help them. So, what are
Hmm.
some things that other people can do when they see, a man around them, like someone they know is not okay, but don't know how to reach out for help, like how to ask them if they need any help or if they can, you know, be there for them.
I think the main challenge there is that a lot of people, when you suggest to them that if you're struggling, you can ask me for help, they react very strongly to it. Are you
Hmm.
saying that I'm crazy? Do you think that I am just a depressed man who is just going to sit and mope around? There is so much that has been internalized within them that it's possible that they lash out even if you offer a very sincere offer of help, right?
Yeah.
And that's something you need to be wary of. If a person has had outbursts like that and you are afraid that something like that might happen, it's best not to do anything, because as tough as it is to say, if you don't ask for help, if you don't accept help, there's nothing that can be done.
Hmm.
It's something that we acknowledge even as therapists, as psychologists. It's something to work on. We work on it. We work on resistance in therapy. We work on those things, definitely. But a person has to come into the therapy room as well in the first place for something to happen. And we can't force them, and we can't just tie them up and say, okay, you are now taking therapy. You are now getting our help, whether you like it or not. Of
Hmm.
course, it's always a good idea to reach out to them, tell them that these are the changes you're seeing in them. You were not like this
Hmm.
before. These are the things I've noticed about you. I am concerned about you. If you feel like you need any kind of help, I am here for you. I'll try my best. Even if you want to vent, even if you need some company, even if you just don't want to do anything and just need to be around somebody, I'll be here to help. You can do those things. But if the other person is insistent that there's nothing wrong, that I'm completely fine and there's nothing anybody needs to do, then there's nothing anybody can do.
Well, that's a very strong statement that you made because I think I was someone who was a fixer. Like I'm like, okay, you should go for therapy. You should go for therapy. But now I've made peace with the fact no matter how much I ask someone, they'll go only if they want to go. So I received this very interesting question in my DM. Uh, that's on the screen right now. I want to break up with my boyfriend because he doesn't want to go to therapy. How do I insist him to take therapy? This is
Well, I think the questions worth asking here are, what are the things that make you think he should go to therapy? Like, what is it that's making you think that he needs therapy in his life? And secondly, I think portraying therapy as something magical, something that will fix everything about you, uh, is a bit insulting to both the boyfriend and therapy itself, because that's not how either of it works, right? A person needs to have an understanding of what they want to fix, what they want to change, what they want to uh, understand about themselves when they are in therapy. Somebody who's being guilted into coming to therapy, somebody who's being forced into coming to therapy, will not have a very pleasant experience of therapy, because they won't know what to do. It's not that we do some rituals on them when they come to therapy, and the input is different. We do some magic rituals on them, and the output is completely a different person. It's a collaborative process, right? So I'll be honest, I have had a lot of clients who have come to me because their partners insisted on coming, and they just thought, okay, I'll give it a try. Uh, but to suggest that you will end the relationship if the other person doesn't go to therapy, I'm not sure that is as helpful as you'd like it to be.
Hmm. I mean, I hope she
That's as
listens
kindly as I
to.
can put it. That's as kindly as I can put it, at least.
Maybe you can try as more, perhaps bluntly, and being more.
Forcing
So like,
somebody to go to therapy is never a good idea.
yeah, I have realized this quite some time back, and I made peace with it. I mean, I do still recommend when someone asks me like, "Divya, what do I do?" But that's a very different ball game as against me just
Yeah,
randomly telling someone you should go for therapy because you have these things.
definitely. I think, matlab, even on Instagram comments, I see this very often, right? Ki if somebody is disagreeing with you, somebody is saying something that you find disturbing, it's like go to therapy. You need therapy in your life, and it's like, क्या हो जाएगा therapy जाके भी? मतलब it's almost an insult to say. It's used in an insulting way, isn't it? Ki, go to therapy. You
Hmm.
need to go to therapy. What
Yeah.
you are suggesting, recommending somebody who's reaching out to you for help and asking you what they can do, and then you say you can try out a therapist, you can try out therapy, how it works. That's fair. Chalta hai. It's an honest
Hmm.
suggestion that you're making. Uh,
Hmm.
Having a gun to somebody's head and saying go to therapy right now, uh,
Yes, because we've been talking so much of therapy. What I want to know, so I'm like out of 10 clients, right? Hypothetically, how many of them are actually men in your clientele? Like, what's the ratio proportion? Do men actually come in for therapy
so
willingly?
look, because I am so vocal on men's mental health, I feel like a lot of men are more comfortable in reaching out to me. So
Hmm.
my ratio usually ends up being somewhere around 60-40 or 30-70. Mostly it's still women, but there are a lot of men who are showing up to therapy. uh, are they doing it willingly? Most of them, yes. Again, I feel like it's because the work I do resonates with them and they feel like they want to seek therapy from me. uh, but still there are a lot of people, and the other therapists I talk to, most of them, the guys that come in, it's because their partners, their family members, their sisters, they have just told them go to therapy, try it out, see how it feels. So the first sessions, mostly for most men, end up being experimental sessions. Ki, let's just see how it feels. And again, my own experiences apart, most therapists only have a female clientele.
Yeah.
They will have maybe one or two male clients. The rest are all women. So the ratio is quite skewed in that regard.
Hmm. How can is so why do you I mean, of course I understand one is the whole stigma and the taboo around this, but the whole gender ratio skewness. How can like why do you think there's such a big disparity between the two genders seeking help?
देखो, I feel like there's a huge disparity in how therapy works itself, right? Like talk therapy, uh,
Hmm.
it works on the very basic assumption that a person who comes into therapy will be aware of what they're struggling with to some degree. They will be aware that they're struggling with something, and they'll be able to verbalize it, that they will be able to put it in words and then express themselves, express their emotions very well. But with guys, it's like since we were 5 6, we have been told not to verbalize emotions, not to show emotions. And when you get in your 20s, that becomes the norm for you, that non-verbal emotions are the norm, and you're not supposed to show them in your classroom, in your workplace, with your friends, with your partners. You're just supposed to keep them inside. You're just supposed to occasionally show some emotion, but not a lot. And then you go to a therapist, and the therapist says, okay, tell me everything, tell me what's up. And that can be a very difficult process to actually get in touch with emotions once again, right?
Hmm.
To actually be able to verbalize emotions once again, to actually trust the therapist with these things. Uh, and there is also the element that a lot of therapists actually are not that good. A lot of therapists don't really give people the respect they need. when they're resistant, when they're struggling to open up. So there are a lot of bad therapists out there as well. So it's quite a complicated thing that verbalizing our emotions is difficult, and therapy often works on the bedrock that you verbalize emotions, which is why there are a lot of global initiatives which work on involving men through activities. So what will happen is that
Okay.
men will be involved in some community activities. You're either building something, building some woodwork, you're playing some sports, you're playing PS5, and during that you just end up talking about what's going on in your life. It's more
Hmm.
shoulder to shoulder instead of face to face. That kind of
Hmm.
conversations happen more often with men, and that ends up being more productive for them as well.
So it's like, I mean, from my understanding of this whole, I'd say the whole body language thing, it's like you don't really want to be sitting in front of someone and going down the route of acceptance. Is it something on those lines, or is it something else?
It's like we don't have a switch inside us, right? We don't have a
Hmm.
switch which is it's not a tap that's holding all the
Yeah.
emotions back, and then we go to a therapist and we turn that tap on and everything comes down. It's a process, to trust
Hmm.
somebody, to understand yourself, to express those things in words. um, but the thing is that when you go out of the therapy room, you again have to turn that tap off, that proverbial tap off. Bahar, you can't show these
Yeah.
things. So there's a bit of a mismatch in the world we create for the person inside the therapy room and what is expected from them outside it. And the long term change for that is to change both things a bit more, right? We change some approaches in therapy, in how we approach therapy for men, and change some things in how society acknowledges emotions in men. So it's a give and take dynamic process.
Can you double tap a bit into, when you mentioned about changes in approach of therapy, especially when it comes to perhaps addressing men,
Hmm.
right? Could you just like double tap in there?
Huh. Double tap basically means more information, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what I'm essentially trying to understand is key. Let's pick any modality, perhaps say CBT or yeah, I think CBT is something everyone understands, so let's stick to that. How does it really differ in terms of the therapy delivery between a male client and a female client?
I think the
In
major,
simplest words.
I think the major differences I have observed, and from the research papers I have observed, men drop out a lot quicker than women, because for men, it's the connection with the therapist is very important. Okay?
Hmm.
And CBT is very directed, very goal oriented, which can become a bit difficult for men, because it's like, we want to actually explore our emotions in depth. And CBT doesn't always, matlab, you definitely can change those things, change some things within CBT, but there are a lot of times where it's like, okay, we don't want it to keep it surface level, we actually want to go in depth. CBT cannot offer that. And another major thing is that actually forming that rapport with the clients takes a lot more time with men,
Hmm.
uh, where it's like the client is also testing you throughout. They are also trying to see whether you are actually competent enough to treat them or not, to listen to their story or not. So it's a longer process, it's a more drawn out process with men. I believe personally that it's very, very fulfilling no matter how long it takes. If you stick through it, if the client sticks through it, it will be a very fulfilling process. And those are the major differences that exist in, how therapy is approached for men and for women.
What are some of the common myths you have, you know, like that you do come across as facts but are actually myths that you would like to like burst out just today?
Men don't show their emotions. That's a big one. That's a very big one.
Okay.
Men are showing their emotions all the time. Everything. um We do expresses our emotions. The difference is we don't really express them verbally. It is a lot more action oriented. Okay, so I'll share an example I like to share from my dad. Okay, we rarely talk on call. Just say when I'm in Gurgaon and he's back home, it will never happen that he gives me a call separately. But when he gives me a call, it happens once in 2 weeks. He just asks me, "Beta, how are you? All okay? Need any help?" Okay, okay. Yeah, that's basically a 10-15 second call, but that is a signal. Papa misses me. It's time to go back home. Go back home for a few days. Spend some time with him. Yeah. Now he won't actually tell me that he misses me. He doesn't need to tell me that he misses me, but I get it that he misses me, and I should go back now, just for a few days, visit him, see him how he's doing. And I feel a lot of guys end up expressing their emotions like this, where it's very tiny things, very small things that actually have a lot of emotion behind them. And the problem is that because there is so much emotion behind them, and on the surface it looks so tiny, uh, the other person might not always catch it, that this is actually
Hmm.
something that's pretty big, right? Like
Yeah.
if I was an idiot and I didn't understand that my dad is missing me, I just think that, what is this? My dad just calls me every 2 weeks and just spends 10 seconds on call with me, and then he cuts the call. What is this? Does he not love me at all? uh, but thankfully that doesn't happen with me. But there are instances like this where we don't really catch these expressions of emotion.
Hmm.
We wait for it to be very verbal, we wait for it to be very overt, which I will be, as a guy, I will be honest, it is very scary to tell somebody you miss them. Okay. So we do
Why?
these, it is very scary यार, मतलब ऐसे आप ऐसे उनको बोलो कि तुम्हारी याद आ रही है, it's so much
No, I
internal
am
business.
genuinely this thing that, like, I was listening to you, and then I was listening to you with so much focus, and just when you said, no, it's difficult for, like, scary for men to
Yeah,
say that they miss you. In my head, it was like a huge scream of why? Like, it's not in a funny, of course. I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but the larger thing is that what is it like? Like, if you love someone, why can't you just tell them that you miss them? Like, what is so difficult about it? I'm genuinely trying to understand so I can be more compassionate to men in my life.
I think I don't know if I'm speaking for all men or for most men out there, but I think somewhere there is this fear that of being vulnerable. That when you tell somebody you miss them, it's like, I'd like you to be a part of my life, a more active part of my life, and I miss that part. Yeah, it's like it's like showing somebody a part of you that is a bit soft, and then the conditioning comes in. The conditioning kicks in for 20 30 years that we've had. You are not supposed to do this, and if you do this, you are very not a boy, not a man in the first place,
Yeah.
right? So again, as I said, I know that it's okay. Well, intellectually I know that it's okay to tell somebody you love them. It's something I should be doing, but actually doing it is still a challenge for me. Even as a therapist, I don't mind saying that expressing my emotions as fully as I feel them is a huge challenge for me, even now, because you can't really overcome those years of conditioning in a few years, in a few months,
Hmm.
weeks, any time scale, right? So again, it's like थोड़ा आप भी समझो हमारी बातें, और थोड़ा हम भी कोशिश करेंगे अपनी बातें समझाने की, एंड थोड़ा एक we'll come to some middle ground eventually.
That's Arjun speaking on behalf of all the men, I guess, because this does feel like a very familiar narrative to me, with all the, fun and jokes aside, because I have genuinely struggled with a lot of times. So, like, because men don't express, like,
Yeah,
somehow I have some friends who just, like, legit used to go silent off social media, off everything, and then they expect me to call them and ask them that they're not okay. How on earth am I supposed to know you're not okay? Right. So that's why I'm like, yeah, I genuinely do want to understand men in my life, because I mean, I can't help them. I can't be compassionate to them if I can't understand them. Like, I mean, that's the ideology with which I, work. And this brings me to the next question that someone asked in the my DMs. How can I create a safe space for men in my life?
Huh, very good question. And I feel the most important thing you can do, uh, don't tell them it's a safe space. Make them believe that it's a safe space, which is like, what happens is a lot of times, for a lot of female friends in my life, when they want to get something out of me, when I'm struggling, they're like, okay, this has happened in my life. This is how everything is going wrong in my life. So I have told you. Now you tell me what is going wrong in your life. It's like an exchange process. Okay? Uh, but what happens in those situations is I just feel like, okay, this person already is very burdened by a lot of problems. I don't want to add to it. I don't want her to feel like she has the burden to solve my problems as well. She's also already struggling so much. So instead of actually making me open up, it only makes me shut down more. Yeah. So creating a
Hmm.
safe space for men in your life has more to do with companionship, doing activities with them, doing stuff that they find interesting or they just enjoy doing instead of actually talking. There's a lot of silence in creating that safe space. There's a lot of times where nothing is happening, where nobody is talking, nobody is doing anything. Maybe you're just watching a movie, maybe you're playing a game, maybe you're playing football, maybe you're watching football or watching a cricket match. That's it. That will create a safe space where he'll be like, okay, this person is there, and if I ever want to talk, I will be able to talk to them. And when they eventually do end up talking about something, listen to them. Listen, actually listen to them. ये नहीं कि okay, this is bad, but you know what my friend actually went through, that was so much worse. uh, Actual listening also takes a lot of skills eventually. You're respectful of the other person's needs. You're not diminishing their problems, and you're trying to understand them. That is a challenge in itself. So uh, be a companion. If there is a lot of silence, that is okay. uh, and be an actual listener instead of being like, okay, no, you're just making things up. Blah, 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 blah.
Do men not want, I would say, reassurance?
We, not verbally, behaviorally.
Okay, like again, you'll have to tell me a bit
It's
more
one
because
thing to
I
say that I
genuinely.
will be there for you in your tough times. It's another thing to say that it's another thing to be there in the tough times. Not doing anything, not actively solving anything, not actively listening to anything, just being there, actually being there. So it's one thing to say, it is not as reassuring to say, I will be there for you, because
Hmm.
it feels more like lip service instead of actual stuff. So we do want reassurance, but we want it with actions instead of just saying,
Okay.
we will be there for you, we are proud of you. uh, okay, show us that you're proud of us. Do something like that. That will be a lot more helpful.
So, so far with this conversation, what I'm understanding, and please correct me if I've gotten any piece of it wrong, is that men, of course, they do like to have their own space and they take their own sweet time to open up and be vulnerable to anyone, perhaps, in their life. And we, as on the other hand, receivers of the whole situation, should be, I guess, a lot more patient because uh, since men take a lot of time, and this very good example that you quoted about yourself, right? That when your female friends share their narratives in a hope that you will share yours. This is
Yeah.
actually something that's a very new thought process, like a very, I would say, something that was not expected in the context of that. This is why men then don't share because, like, I am also guilty of doing this. I will not deny. Like, I do it, and I mean, I do it with an intention. If I share it, they'll probably open up because
Yeah.
when I do it with females, they do it, right? But now I'm understanding probably why men don't do it because you're already feeling burdened with, um, you know, that okay, सामने वाला तो already परेशान है, अब मैं क्यों और ही परेशान करूं इसको.
Yeah.
Well, this is a very, very interesting conversation, and I want to go to the next question with this. Why should men go for therapy? This was again one of the questions I received in my DMs. And the funny part is, all the questions are in my DMs, be it LinkedIn, be it Insta, be it WhatsApp, none on the comments.
That is another thing. That is another thing to discuss in itself, isn't it? But I think don't go to therapy expecting some magic thing to happen. Don't go to therapy expecting some divine knowledge to be given to you, and it'll be like you will be a completely different person immediately. Go to therapy if you want to understand yourself better, if you want to have a different perspective on the events of your life, if you want to have a uh, better relationships in your life. I think one of the best things therapy offers is it improves your relationship with your own self, with your own internal world, and that helps you have more deeper and more meaningful relationships in your life, whether it's romantic relationships, friendships, relationships at the workplace as well, with your bosses, with your colleagues, with your juniors. uh, Therapy is a process more concerned with your internal world, and if you want to explore that internal world, understand that internal world, and change some things in in that internal world, you can go to therapy. uh, if you are feeling some very clear problems that you're facing, you feel numb inside, you feel like you're not performing, you're not functioning as you used to, you're distressed all the time, you are struggling to live life the way you used to live it. In those cases you should go to therapy. I think that is more general, there's nothing to do with men in there. uh, Men should go to therapy the same reason anybody else should go to therapy, uh, to have a better understanding of themselves, of their pasts, of their possible futures, and to have more deeper and more meaningful relationships. That's it.
Coming back to one of the previous questions in the early conversation we were having around myths, right? You talked about that men don't express emotions, right? What more? Like, I think I want to go back there and dive a little more deeper in there.
Huh. Men definitely show their emotions. It's a myth to say that they don't. Another myth that I can think of, men should cry, and that would fix everything. So whenever it's Men's Mental Health Month, I think June mein tha, there was a lot of conversation. At least in my circles, there were a lot of conversations happening on men's mental health. And in November, it's Men's Day. Again, there the same conversations will come in where it's like it's okay to cry. You can cry, cry it out. It's not you don't become less of a man if you cry. ठीक है हमें पता है, we know that, but but again it's not like we have a tap inside us, right? Ki we are just waiting for somebody to tell us that we can cry, and then instantly start crying. I think it's completely missing the point to say that men's mental health will get better if you cry more, if you if you're okay with crying. It's like a very low hanging fruit, it's very easy to say, it's very performative. uh, a crying man, making a man cry will not make him feel better, make him do anything. Um, it it is completely missing the point of men's mental health being a thing as itself. So yeah, that is another myth, that uh, saying real men cry does not help anybody, because we are still playing that same game where somebody else is defining what a real man is, instead of letting men be the men that they are.
It's, I am genuinely at this point in time speechless with the whole thing that you just put out because I mean, with in all good faith and intention, I guess, always wanted to give men a safe space and tell them that you can cry. But I guess I was not doing the right job properly the whole thing. So, what could be a better narrative to this whole thing, if I had to ask you?
I think,
How
and
would you
again,
rephrase this narrative?
I don't think you're wrong in saying that. I think you're coming from a space uh, where it feels like we are actually holding back ourselves from crying at a lot of times. But a lot of times, even when we are going through a very intense emotional experiences, we are not actually crying behind them. Matlab, we are absolutely feeling like trash. We feel like garbage inside, but we don't end up crying, right? um, I think in those moments, what you say, what you need to say, what you can say, again depends on the people you're going through. Just be there. Just be there, whether it's in silence, whether it's in doing some activity, whether it's pin drop silence, nobody saying anything, nobody doing anything. ठीक है. If the other person is actually lashing out at you, if they are hurting you because of their own emotional problems, that is not a good thing. You should get away from that situation. But if a person is going through emotional turmoil and you want to help them out, be there in silence, be there in some activities. uh, don't tell them what they need to do. Just let them know that if they want to talk, you're here. If they feel like talking, you're here. If they don't feel like talking, you are here. If they just want to distract themselves, you are here. That will go a long way than just saying the, you can cry, you can do all these things. वो prescriptive हो जाता है. What a lot of guys need is just some space.
Well, that's a this conversation is actually going in quite deeper and something that was like because it's unscripted, not something I'd actually expected also. This was I don't think there's anyone who actually talks about or has at least not that I've heard of who says that this whole narrative real men can cry, should cry, etc., is actually missing the point and is kind of just positively reframing how a man should be at the end of the day, right? So this whole narrative is something that I had never even thought of from that angle. So thank you so much for bringing that up. It genuinely, uh, you know, means a lot. There's someone in the comments who's look into the shadow. Your shadow consists of all the qualities that you have let go of over the years so that you could be the nice guy. Okay, I know this is not a question, but this is something quite interesting that I want to know your take on.
Hmm. Huh. Okay. Comment on a comment. I feel like this is uh, part of that view where it seems like we guys have to present a very sanitized version of themselves, uh, and and that creates a sense of detachment from our own selves because we have never tapped into the shadow self, as Mayank is saying. And I think he's mentioning Carl Jung's work, where there's
Yeah.
this where there is this shadow self of yours which has never seen the light of day, which hides qualities that are inside you, but you have never touched them because you have had to present a very sanitized version of yourself since your childhood. And ठीक है, yeah, uh, your shadow self, your anima, your animus, they should be integrated into your whole self as a whole. But to completely lean into your shadow self will also create the same problems that are created when you completely ignore your shadow self. So again, it's, I think most of therapy is about balancing those different parts of ourselves and creating a whole adult out of them instead of just completely relying on one few parts.
There's something that I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna just take this last piece from him, like I guess. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not sure if he's agreeing, disagreeing. Anything you wanna say before we move to third myth?
Uh, yeah, I think we're on the same page that a lot of guys have to present a very different version of themselves than what they actually are. And because there has never been sort of internal exploration about what is there inside you, what are the different parts of you which have been shut away because of our childhood conditioning, that those things end up coming roaring out. Okay, that was like a chained beast just unleashing itself, right? And that is again, um, that can again be problematic because it is a beast ultimately. So I think it's about balancing the two, balancing different parts of yourself, and becoming a whole person who is, I believe, who is true to their own values, who's true to their own beliefs, ideals, and living life by those things instead of being determined, being shaped by the people around us.
But isn't it easier said than done? Because I mean, the way the thing this comes from, so I don't think this is just specifically to men. This is as a larger, in my opinion, a problem on a larger scale because we all are expected to behave and be in certain way that we, I mean, at least I have been through that phase where I genuinely did not know who I am as an individual. Even today, I don't know it in entirety, but like, of course, I'll say I'm much better than before in terms of knowing myself. And so, but that was again a journey that I took on and was not the easiest one. And and this is after me being really expressive about my emotions. But for men who are, they do express, as you just like busted a myth, but they do it in ways that's probably not the conventional ways of expressing the emotions, right? So what are like I don't want to call them unconventional ways of expressing, but say some common uh, ways through which men express themselves, but is not something that the society really okay. So like just one example that you gave, right? That if if you're missing someone, you're not really likely to tell them directly, right? And
Hmm.
you'll find ways around saying it. So, what are some of these other examples that you could perhaps give? Probably the anger, the that they're in pain, and like I don't know.
Something that's considered cringe but is actually a very genuine expression of grief, sad stories on your WhatsApp or Instagram.
Okay,
That is especially for young guys who are maybe in 14 to 18-year olds. For a lot of them, the most they will express themselves is by putting up a sad song on their Instagram story or on their WhatsApp story, or putting up a quote about how painful life is there. And I think internet memes have created this turned this into a joke कि भाई इतनी दिक्कत चल रही है तो कुछ कर ही ले. If you're struggling so much, do something. But I feel like those things are very genuine displays of struggle. I feel like those things, we take them very lightly at times. We don't really give them the, especially for young boys, because if you remember being a teenager, everything feels like the end of the world. Every emotion is 100 timed. ठीक है, मतलब it's like you
yeah,
feel everything very extremely, and we treat that as a joke because we feel like we know that this will eventually go away, but for that person it is a very very strong emotion that they have,
mm.
and then to see that others are laughing at it or ridiculing it, um, only furthers the isolation. ठीक है, ऐसे में even just one message, dude, might be completely wrong, but if you're struggling and you want to talk, just drop a text or give me a call. They probably won't, they probably will not do anything, but just dropping something like that will do a lot more for them than making memes about it.
This brings a very important point in my mind. Also, we had Trigger Warning Suicide Prevention Day some days back, right? The fact that people say, they looked happy, they looked normal, but I think these are those subtle signs that people tend to take and fun and choose to ignore, perhaps. And this is something that should be seen. It's not seen. It's made
Yeah,
out
yeah.
and made fun. So
And one of the major things is somebody making jokes about suicide unprompted. uh, I make it a point, if anybody, whether I'm following them or they're in my feed, or they're on my WhatsApp, anywhere, if they make any mention of death by suicide, even in a very humorous way, I just drop a text. Bhai, I could be completely wrong, but I just want to check in. Do you need any help? I am here if you're struggling. Okay. I think, having been there myself, I know that a lot of times it just slips out as a joke, but secretly you also wish that somebody understood it. And that is where I feel, I make it a point to be as mindful about it as possible. um, I don't mind being wrong, because the cost of being right and not doing anything would be a lot worse than being wrong
Yes.
and doing something.
But I mean, I understand you have, you're coming from place of compassion and from wanting to be there. But at least in my network, in my circle, I would say, or people around me, I've seen a lot of Gen Zs or younger folks of my age. They use these words very casually, like they just like throw it. The other day also I corrected someone on LinkedIn when they just went like the auto driver. Something was happening and they used SE, the traumatic experience. And I was like, there is no trauma in there, bro. Do you know the meaning of trauma? The point
Mm.
is that while in lot of cases it's possible that the person might have something subconsciously in there, but then how do you really, perhaps know that पूछना चाहिए या नहीं पूछना चाहिए, and when should you like call out someone for using these words very casually?
देखो, I make it a point that if the person is in my feed, they have shown up, पूछ लो, just ask them if they need some help. Even if chances are they are using it very casually, they don't really mean it, they're not going to do anything, फिर भी पूछ लो, ठीक है? Even if it's very little work to actually ask somebody about this. um, अब ये नहीं बोल रहा मैं कि you are on Instagram comments and if somebody is making some dark jokes about suicide, तो सबको एक एक करके मैसेज करो. but just somebody who you feel is close to you and you want to check in on them, send a text, ठीक है? um, how do you call out, who do you call out if they're using these terms casually? I feel like a lot of it comes down to influence that they have over others. So I remember a few years ago, Hotstar ran this ad that friends turned OCD into a trend. ठीक है? कि Monica is very cleanliness oriented, so she made
Oh,
OCD into a trend. And I feel like Hotstar has a lot of influence. Matlab, they have a lot of
yeah.
influence, a lot of people. A lot of people will watch their ads. So I wrote an email to them. I called them out, okay, because they have a lot of influence. So they should be more
Hmm.
responsible.
Hmm.
Uh, and they eventually took that ad down. They were very responsive to it. A person with like 30 followers making a meme about it. ठीक है, they still have influence over those 30 people. I try to talk to that person on their text, on DMs, to see if they're receptive to it, if they're actually willing to change, if they're actually willing to open to changing. Because again, if they're not willing to change, if they're like, no, no, this is what it is and this is how I will use it, so they will keep using it and they'll only end up using your time and they'll use it as engagement if you engage with their content. So you have to be very, I personally try to be very mindful with how I use my energy online, who I spend time in calling out, who I spend time in not calling out. जो करना है करो. And
इतना ही कर सकता हूँ मैं.
इतना ही कर सकते हो. You have to be very aware कि you can't do everything online and you can't change everybody's mind online. uh, you can't make people change through a few comments. So it's a lot deeper than that. तो अपनी एनर्जी बचाओ, अपना जो ठीक कर सकते हो वो करो, जिन लोगों को ठीक गाइड कर सकते हो, जो ठीक इन्फॉर्मेशन रख सकते हो वो रखो, और उम्मीद करो कि दैट डज बेटर.
Well, that's a lot of, like in genuinity, it's a lot of deep conversation that I'm having right now, and a lot of realizations, be it in terms of the myths that you just talked about, be it in terms of how men express. Because there was something again, I was reading this book called The Mask of Masculinity by Lovis Foos, I guess,
Okay.
and it's a beautiful book that and the first book, that perhaps I picked up, but do you have any such recommendations that people could perhaps turn to, or men themselves could turn to, perhaps, start understanding themselves better? Though, I mean, therapy is one of the many options, but what are, like, some of the other options that you might want to suggest?
Hmm. देखो, I am a more research oriented person. ठीक है, I'll be very honest. I am more oriented towards something like research and research of Dr. Zach Seidler. ठीक है, he's a psychologist from Australia, and he is running some of the foremost initiatives on men's mental health in US, in Australia, in UK, and across the world. He is at the forefront of any conversations that you have on men's mental health, um, because I feel the work that he does, the research work that he does, is very compassionate towards men. Um, it's not filled with jargon. It's not filled with words that we know intellectually, but that don't really resonate with us. So every research paper that I read from him, it teaches me a lot. Matlab, they're oriented towards the men from Australia or the UK, but I feel like if that men from India will also resonate with those things, men from US will also resonate with these things, men from Saudi Arabia will also resonate with those things, because I feel like those things are pretty common across the world. So I'd recommend the work of Dr. Zach Seidler. He's recently launched a book as well on the same thing, men, masculinities, and something. So he's the person to follow, in my opinion.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Arjun. So, as we're coming closer to the end of this session, are there any some last pieces of advice or things that you would like to, perhaps share that you feel needs to be really, or that you want to share? I won't put a tag to it.
The thing with such questions is that it feels like it has to be the most important thing that you say. कि
No,
एकदम
it could be this.
है.
एक जोक क्रैक कर दो मेरे को, एंड यू कुड ऑनेस्टली भी लाइक कि यार विवा नहीं है, कुछ नहीं है, आई थिंक मेरे पास जितना था उतना मैंने बता दिया, थैंक यू, गुड नाइट। मेरे को
नहीं
वो भी
देखो,
चलेगा।
basically what I'd say is that the men in your life are human beings, as difficult as it might be to believe. They are human beings who feel a lot of emotions, who have a very rich and very complex internal world, and some compassion to them won't hurt. They might not be receptive to it straight away. They'll be like, it's like a person who has been abused for so long that they feel like even compassion is a trick to to something worse. But compassion is something that we need a lot more in today's world, and a bit more compassion will go a long way for everybody.
Being compassionate is the key to making men feel safe and being there. Don't talk nothing, just be there in that nothingness. I think there's beauty in nothingness. This I
Yeah.
read somewhere, and it's stuck with me, and I've been trying to go into that nothingness zone. Not that very successful, but
It's very difficult for to have nothingness as well, because we are so used to having something. Matlab, silences can be scary
stimulations.
for so many people, right? Because we are so used to not being silent. So yeah, it's beautiful, but it's also very difficult.
Yep. Thank you so much, Arjun, for coming and giving your time and sharing your expertise here with everyone. And to everyone who's watching, just a quick heads up that I want to give is that Arjun would be soon doing a personal branding workshop. And he is actually the best person for this because he has gone out and made his personal brand around this one thing, right? That's men's mental health. He very actively advocates about it. So I think this is he's the right person for practitioners, for therapists, and for anyone who wants to really build their narrative, their personal brand around a specific narrative. So yeah, you guys can stay tuned, and soon I'll share all the details as soon as possible, I guess. Yeah. Arjun, anything else that you'd like to say before we say goodbye? Yep. Yeah.
नहीं, मेरा हो गया, बस मेरा हो
हो गया?
गया.
अच्छा, ठीक है. Thank you so much, Arjun, once again. Genuinely, thank you for coming in and talking on this topic and helping me actually raise awareness and take a step towards in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for having this conversation, and I look forward to working with you soon.